Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather on this 13th day of March 2020. Hard to believe half of March is about gone already this year. And up first on the first graphic here, this is a webcam shot of Nome, and you can see kind of blowing light snow and blowing snow, but visibilities aren't that bad. The blizzard warning, or the blizzard warning, is ended now as conditions improve there. We'll still be kind of up and down and gusty winds here for the next 12 to 24 hours. Moving out west to Gamble here. Also, you can see the base of the mountains over here. So blizzard winter storm warning conditions have ended there as well. The winter weather advisory remains out for tonight and tomorrow for gusty winds, snow, blowing snow, reduced visibilities at times of a half mile or less, but temperatures approaching freezing here this afternoon. I think it was 31 at Gamble, and of course you get up to about 32, and blowing snow really becomes much less of a factor than what's down in the 20s. And then the next shot here, moving along, you can see is, there we go, this is Dillingham, down in the sun. Sea-lanes visibility is unlimited. Cavoo conditions here at Dillingham, as well as many areas across southern Alaska today and into the Panhandle. Nice conditions, winds light here at Dillingham, northeast at about 8 to 10 miles an hour, temperature in the upper 20s with brilliant sunshine. And moving to satellite imagery, you can see a big area high pressure here, actually shoving this area moisture up to the north as it tries to push in. And by this afternoon, just grazing the western Arctic coast. Again, that's moved through, moisture's moved through and dissipated as it's moved in, although up to maybe 4 to 6 inches of snow fell in the upslope areas of the Western Brooks Range at some locations there. Otherwise, precipitation amounts not all that great. A couple inches of snow here into the east central interior, but that kind of the exception more than the rule there. And of course, dry down to the south, just some variable high clouds here around south central Alaska, kind of make the sky interesting. Have some cirrus there. Gets a little thicker over the Copper River Basin there. Northerly flow here pulling that down, trying into the Yakutat area, but a sunny day here across the southeast coast. And then out to the west, we've got more moisture streaming northward, kind of a weak low right in this area and a weak occluded front right through here. But that brought, about half an inch of rain or so to the Unalaska Dutch Harbor area, and 1 to 2/10 of an inch fell today at St. George Island there, with Cold Bay having winds gusting at times as high as 60 miles an hour, and pretty strong winds, 40, 60 mile an hour wind gusts here occurring along the southwest coast today in the gradient between this low and the much higher pressure. Very high pressure actually at the surface over the Copper River Basin today. Pressure's up around 1,055 millibars, which is above 31 inches there, so it goes above the altimeter. And those are gonna fall, or starting to fall currently, and so we should lose 1,050 plus millibar pressures by tomorrow. Anyway, roughly, well, actually even stronger winds occurring up here along the northwest coast, with Teller seeing gusts as high as, I think it was, well, Cold Bay had 60 mile an hour wind gusts, and then gust 55 actually along the southwest coast here. Teller seeing gusts to about 74 miles an hour, as did Deering up here on the north side of the Seward Peninsula. In Cape Lisburne, gusts to 80 miles an hour, and even stronger, little elevation there in the DeLong Mountains. Winds, one station there reported gusts to 110 miles an hour this afternoon. They're about the 1,600 foot level. So very strong winds here, kind of the classic pattern for those strong winds blowing there. and you can see that area of moisture just skirting the Arctic coast. On the chart today, areas of blowing snow, but again, precipitation amounts not all that impressive here, kind of tapering off with this area shifting northward. And again, that high center over the Copper River Basin there, 1,056 millibars, another one over the Yukon, just about as strong. Somewhat weaker, but still formidable high center there over the Gulf of Alaska, or southern Gulf of Alaska, at 1,047 millibars. And that really controlling the weather over much of the interior, pushing this moisture to the north and keeping it back to the west for the most part, and trying to keep it off to the east, but northerly flow aloft, pulling that cirrus southward in to the eastern North Gulf Coast. And sunshine over the Panhandle today. Otherwise, this weak front, again, bringing the rain to the Alaska Peninsula and those 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts at Cold Bay, and some moisture up to the Pribilofs. Otherwise, just areas of fog reported at Atka, and clouds. Not much precipitation in this batch of cloudiness here. Back towards Shimia, just reporting cloudy skies there. Somewhat higher pressure back behind that. And then another system trying to push onto the map there, just really the cloud shield and pressure field making its way on at mid-afternoon today. For tonight, a front will appear out here as it pushes up into the Russian Far East, that low tracking into the northeast Sea of Okhotsk, and then higher pressure up through here. Very weak low comes northward and really almost washed out at this time. Front definitely washed out here, just a trough. Another batch of moisture, snow, maybe blowing and drifting snow, pushes into the western interior. Could see anywhere from 4 to 8, maybe 10 inches of snow. And the heaviest amounts will be on the upslope areas here. Otherwise, it'll be lighter, but definitely another surge of snow and blowing snow coming into the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, and into the central interior. Eastern interior, a little breezy, but dry with some clearing, variable clouds. Stays clear. Southern and southeast Alaska in the interior, actually all the way down the Panhandle. Gusty outflow winds continue here for the Panhandle. That strong but slowly weakening high over the Yukon into British Columbia. High pressure holds southeast of Kodiak, definitely keeping it dry and mostly clear there. And maybe a few scattered rain and snow showers along the Alaska Peninsula, probably in the form of rain at sea level. Of course, higher elevations, that'd be snow. Rain, though, with this next weak front spreads into mostly Unmak Island, Nikolsky, and a chance of a little bit of light moisture there for the Unalaska area and Dutch Harbor. Aleutians, western and central, looking pretty good here. Light winds, dry conditions, and hopefully VFR. Looking ahead to tomorrow's forecast, that front edges eastward. Really doesn't make too much progress due to the high pressure here in advance of that. Trough right through here. Rain in the southern areas in the warmer air, kind of a mixed condition here as you get up around the southwest coast. And then just areas of light snow, heaviest, but not all that heavy back here over the Yukon Delta up into the Nulato Hills and the Seward Peninsula. Areas of snow and snow showers, pretty light here though into the Kobuk-Koyukuk Valley. That gets even lighter and more isolated as you head northeast there up toward the Mackenzie River Delta area. High pressure holding, but again weakening here, now down to 1,043 millibar center. It's getting squeezed off over the Northway Tok area, and a weakening center holds southeast of Kodiak. A new one pops up here over the northwest coast, Cape Lizard. So that's definitely much lighter winds. In fact, looks like you go light and variable tomorrow compared to the strong winds you've had today. Light winds out west, and the Panhandle, not bad. Sunshine, all of southeast Alaska from the interior Copper River Basin right on down to the Queen Charlotte Islands, with winds still a little gusty in the southern areas. They're really lightening up here in the north. Outlook for Sunday. Front pushes more moisture eastward here, again spreading into the central interior. Some of that could be blowing and drifting around on the western Arctic coast. Snow showers or flurries with the trailing edge of this front, mainly into the Yukon Delta. That cuts off. Should be dry, maybe some clearing for the Kuskokwim Delta. Few snow showers possible. Light snow showers, western slopes of the Alaska Range here, maybe the Kuskokwim Valley. Nothing significant at all. Partly and mostly sunny Bristol Bay, sunny Kodiak Island. Another clear, light wind day, south central Alaska, actually from all of the eastern interior, Copper River Basin, Gulf, Prince William Sound, right on down the southeast coast. Light winds, sunshine, and rain. Another surge with that trough coming up to the Alaska Peninsula. Main storminess holding way back out there to the west. Lows for tonight. A little below zero here, Copper River Basin up into the eastern Tanana Valley. Otherwise above zero, although Arctic Village still could drop to 5 below. Milder 20s to lower 30s here as you get out to the southwest coast with above freezing temperatures for the Aleutians and Pribilofs. 20s for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow 30s to lower 40s for the southeast coast. 20s mid to upper south central Alaska. Upper 30s there out along the coast near 40 Kodiak Island. 20s central interior and well above freezing here. Well above zero for the Arctic coast near 20 to maybe lower 20s on the east side. Lows on Sunday morning. Now you're back down below zero there for the North Slope and Arctic coast in that 15 to 20, 25 below range. Otherwise, south of the mountains, though, the Brooks Range, temperatures a fair ways above zero, 10 to 20. 5 to 15, Tanana Valley, single number, south central Alaska, followed by highs 25 to 35, southern Alaska, and in the teens on the Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather, big area IFR out here, southwest flow coming northward across the Aleutians, central eastern Bering Sea, then pushing into the interior here, Yukon Delta, and then thinning out as it gets up toward the eastern Brooks Range North Slope with lee side of the Brooks Range there in the North Slope, some VFR, otherwise marginal Arctic coast. VFR holding here, eastern interior down to the Gulf of Alaska, and maybe marginal VFR showing up around areas of Kodiak Island, and some IFR chances here, Bristol Bay into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, and VFR, far western Aleutians, VFR for the Panhandle and North Gulf Coast. That holds through the afternoon, some IFR possibly slipping into the greater Fairbanks area, more than likely just to the north there in the mountains, the White Mountains there back, a little bit better chance in Tanana, Norton Sound, Yukon Delta, looks IFR with that westerly flow carrying the moisture in, as well as eastern Bering Sea. Kodiak, still a chance of marginal VFR there. Pretty iffy on the marginal here for Cook Inlet into the Sitna Valley, but looks like good VFR here for the Copper River Basin on down the southeast coast. And for Sunday morning, IFR here into the central interior once again, kind of streaming eastward. Looks like all the way to the border there. And then good IFR in the forecast here from Bristol Bay northward across the Kuskokwim Valley, west of the Alaska Range out to the coast, St. Lawrence Island, Pribilofs, and central Aleutians, as well as the Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula. And now some IFR showing up there, southern Shelikof Strait, southwest Kodiak Island, and maybe increasing marginal VFR here, Cook Inlet into the Susitna Valley, and VFR, Prince William Sound, on down the southeast coast, also up from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, VFR. And for Sunday morning, IFR banking up along and south of the central and western Brooks Range, back to the southwest across Norton Sound there, and southwest coast as well. And the lowest conditions will be on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula, and IFR again, central Aleutians, Shimianatu in the VFR zone, and anywhere east and south of the Alaska Range will be VFR all the way down to the Gulf of Alaska, VFR for the southeast coast, and passes for tomorrow, IFR for Adigan and Anatuvik to start, and then batch of moisture slips onto the east, so improving the marginal VFR for both passes for the afternoon hours. Lake Clark and Merrill, another VFR day coming up, but look for an increase in the mid and high level clouds, possibly lowering, but staying in the VFR zone through the entire day tomorrow. Same forecast for rainy, increasing clouds, but staying VFR, windy, staying VFR as well, thickening lowering clouds in the afternoon, but staying above the marginal threshold. And for Isabel, VFR, Mentasta, St. Lune's visibility is unlimited for that pass, as well as Tanita and Portage, good VFR again tomorrow. Chilcoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels hugging the coastline here, Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, Shelikof Strait, and then northward here, push a warmer air, that southerly wind on the west side of the ridge there, 6,000 feet over the Fox Islands, 2,000 feet into the Yukon Delta. And icing, moisture, best chance here Fox Islands into the Pribilofs, and then it thins out as it comes inland here, really breaks up and becomes less significant, less of a threat the farther northeast you go. Nothing to the south or to the northwest, none for the Panhandle. Jet stream, big upper level high here centered over the Gulf of Alaska or Northeast Pacific, and kind of got this low tracking eastward, putting a squeeze on the atmosphere. Got 130 knot west-southwest jet there across the Brooks Range North Slope. Otherwise, not too bad. Northerlies diminishing here as the ridge kind of flattens out a little bit, down to 90 knots, mainly over the Queen Charlottes. And at 9,000 feet, 35 to as high as 55 knots there for the eastern Arctic coast out of the west or west-southwest. Southeasterly winds 15 to 20, southeast Bering Sea, Alaska Peninsula. And then light westerlies, southern Alaska, turning north, maybe up to 20 knots or so for the Panhandle. And at 3,000 feet, pretty light winds, southern Alaska under high pressure. Westerlies, 20 to 40 knots, maybe higher for the Arctic coast. And Panhandle 5 to 15 or 20, 25 for the Fox Islands. Turbulence-wise, moderate chop for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, and up in the northeast.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service with another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining me today are not just one, but two people, both with the last name Stevens, which is even more fun, but no relation. We have Eric Stevens from Dehne and George Stevens, who is a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And today you guys brought a really cool toy, or I should say tool, with you. It's a sandbox, but why are you guys working on a sandbox?
Well, it's part of our senior design project, and we were approached by AKwx to build this for them. They had a proof of concept that they developed about a year ago, I think, and they wanted a more robust version that they could pack onto a plane and take places, and it's a handy learning tool for kids and adults.
So you're a mechanical engineering student. You've built a traveling sandbox for the experimental program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR, and Dehne's facilitated this. But why do we need a traveling sandbox?
Well, the prototype was such a big hit that they decided they wanted another one, actually two, that they could that would be easier to travel with, you know, possibly marketable even.
Okay, so this is a traveling sandbox that's got a lot of bits and pieces and a computer hooked up to it. What is the computer doing with the sand?
The computer actually uses a Kinect sensor to read the topography of the sand or the shape of the sand, and then the computer translates that into information which it projects using a projector onto the sand, showing topographical lines and which is representative of the shape of the sand.
Okay, so this is a live mapping tool?
Yeah. It's interactive. As you're moving your hands through it, it is actively following and changing the lines to fit what you're doing.
That sounds like something I could have in my backyard.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun. So you guys had to change the design a little bit to make this more Alaska-fied, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, how'd you do that?
Well, the original was made out of basically lumber and Simpson strong tie type stuff, and we rebuilt it to make it lighter and basically more transportable. We can pack it down to a fairly small size, and it can be loaded onto a plane and flown anywhere in the state.
Which you guys did today. And you have plans to take this in other places of Alaska, right?
Yep, we're actually going to be headed down to Homer with it later today.
Okay, very good. Eric, how does this fit into science learning around Alaska?
Well, you know what? I think it is a tool and it is a toy. And it brings out a smile from an 8-year-old and the smile from a 48-year-old with that inner 8-year-old wanting to get out. The sandbox, it's an interactive learning tool that teaches us how topography in the 3 dimensions is related to, say, a 2-dimensional map. More about that later. Just like George was saying, it's got a Kinect sensor, not just for video games anymore. It can sense out the lay of the land there, feeds that information in the computer. The computer identifies that, sends a signal to a projector to send topographic lines to map over that lumpy ground. So you get a 3-dimensional topo map out of it. And my favorite thing about it, this is the thing that stops people at the trade show, they stop at your booth and don't leave, is that you run your hand through that sandbox and it responds in real time. It remaps
Yeah, it's cool.
the topography as you get to be Mr. Tectonic Plate Drifter there. You can make things how you want. Well, what if we made a really high mountain here and a low valley there, and the lines adjust to what you did? It's a learning tool because it shows you that connection between these two-dimensional topo lines and what's really out in Alaska. And Alaska's a place with all kinds of topography. You know, we're from the Great Plains, where topo maps tend to be just like blank pieces of paper, but Alaska is particularly gifted in this regard, and this tool helps us, I think, learn more about our state, really.
Absolutely. And so this is going to enhance STEM learning, the science, technology, engineering, and math in many different locations around Alaska. Then this would be something that kids and teachers can get their hands on.
It sure is. And I mentioned the it's like flypaper at a booth that, or at the Science Potpourri when we had Greg's original version of this sandbox, and that one was made out of scraps of wood, and it was a prototype. But even that one, before it had some of the refinements that George and crew have made for this newer, upscaled, maybe a 2.0 version of the sandbox, even that one was so attractive to people. It just demonstrated that this has potential to be a learning tool, an outreach tool, an education tool that now is portable and can go places in Alaska. Of course, there's only one sandbox, can't be everywhere at once, but hopefully it gets out there, gets the word out about EPSCoR and what science is being done here for Alaskans.
All right, that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to get my hands in the sand and try this out for myself. We're going to demonstrate this here in our next segment of Alaska Weather Facts, but before we go, we want to remind you that EPSCoR, which is a new acronym for me now, but I'm going to remember this because you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and I invite you to do that. Alaska EPSCoR is also something that facilitates science learning at the University of Alaska around the state, and that stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. So check that out, and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to have the next version where we actually get our hands in the sand and check out how this works and demonstrates that topography. So for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you again next time.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, of course, with southerly winds, warmer temperatures, ice edge heading northward, especially here out to the west where the stronger winds are. And actually, forecast for the next 5 days, there is no southward or southwest movement to the ice expected at all. Continue to progress northward with kind of surges of wind and warmer temperatures over the next 5 days. And for the coastal water forecast, southern southeast coast, northeast winds 15 to 20 knots, seas 6 to 7 feet. North to northwest 15 here on the north coast. Still holding on to some 40-knot northerly gusts there for Lynn Canal. Otherwise sustained 25. Northeast lighter for Stevens Passage at 15. And Clarence Strait northerlies at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. And for Sunday, lighter winds, but still clear, cloudless skies here for all of the inside waters. North at about 10 knots, central and southern areas. The Lynn Canal north 15, seas 2 to 3 feet. North to northwest, 20 knots on the south coast. Northwest, 20 knots at times on the north coast with 6-foot seas. Prince William Sound, light westerlies tomorrow, 10 knots. Go with the clear skies, seas 2 feet. West 15 knots there for the Middleton Island zone. Southwest 20, western North Gulf Coast. Southwest 15. Not too bad there for the Barren Islands. Northeast 15, Kamishak Bay. Cook Inlet, north to northeast 10 to 15 knots with seas south of the Forelands at 3 feet in the ice-free areas. And for Sunday, light northerly drift here for Cook Inlet at 10 knots or less. West 10 knots, Kamishak Bay. Small craft advisories, Barren Islands. And the western North Gulf Coast, west winds expected at about 25 sustained with 7-foot seas. West 20 knots there for the eastern North Gulf Coast, and continued light winds out of the northwest for Prince William Sound at about 10 knots with slight seas. Kodiak Island, east side here, south 15, Chillicothe Strait, southwest 15. Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisories, southeast 25 to 30 knots, 8 to 12-foot seas. Bristol Bay east at 20 there with of course, no seas. It's ice covered. And for Sunday, bring that 20-knot wind down to 10 knots out of the east, and small craft advisories now on the Pacific side of the peninsula in the marine zones here at 25 knots, lighter on the Bering Sea side. Kodiak Island from Castle Cape northeastward there for all of Kodiak Island marine zones south to southwest 15 knots with 4 to 9 foot seas. Fox Islands tomorrow will go southeast 25 to 30 knots, lighter over toward Nikolsky and more easterly at about 20. Adak and Atka north winds 20 knots, 7 to 11 foot seas. Western Aleutians, kind of a cull here, northwest at 15 and then southwest at 20 with 9 foot seas from Kiska to Shemya. And for Sunday, let's go for some minimum gales out there from Kiska to Shemya. Southeast coming up to 35 knots, seas unchanged at 9 feet. Northeast 25 there from Chitka Island. Central Aleutians, northerlies 25 to 30 knots. Small craft advisory, seas up to 13 feet. And Fox Islands, basically an easterly component from southeast to northeast. 25 to 30 knots, seas running 8 to 16 feet. And the southwest coast, southeast 25 knots. Percy wind advisories there. Kuskokwim Delta, Yukon Delta coastline, southeast 20 for the Pribilofs, 10 foot seas. Northeast 20, St. Lawrence Island. And for Sunday here, south of Nunivak Island, southeast of 20 knots, Yukon Delta coast on up to St. Lawrence Island, including Norton Sound, all south at 20. Light east winds at 10 for St. Matthew Island, east of 15 for the Pribilofs with 6 foot seas. Going up to the Arctic coast here, full gales on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, or west, heading east at 40 knots sustained, 35 knots central coast, coming down to 30 knots here on the west side, and then down to 20 knots over the Chukchi Sea. Looking ahead to Sunday, southeast 20 from Wales up to Cape Thompson, Cape Beaufort, south 20 knots, southeast 25, brisk wind advisories, western Arctic coast. Much lighter winds here on the central and part of the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline, but still looking at brisk wind advisories, but lighter, west at 25 knots. For tonight, a couple of disturbances coming up and over the top. Looks like another surge of snow and blowing snow pushes into the western and then up along the southern slopes of the western Brooks Range. Some of that getting in the Koyukuk Valley, but dry southern Alaska, high pressure holding actually through the weekend down here, but weakening. More snow up to the northwest, but nothing too serious on Sunday afternoon with this weak cold front moving in, then some light moisture and milder temperatures into the Alaska Peninsula.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.